somewhere in the Siberian taiga, so far east that the maps stop feeling real, there is a village. 500 people call it home. The rest of the world calls it uninhabitable. Every video you've ever seen about this place asks the same question: how do they survive? But that is not the right question. The right question, the one no one seems to be asking, is why do they choose to stay? When leaving has never been easier, when the rest of the world is right there waiting. In this documentary, we are not going to watch people struggle with the cold. We are going to understand what it means to build a life, a real one, with meaning and dignity, in the most extreme place on Earth. And by the end, I think you will find that the word home means something slightly different than it did when you pressed play. So carry this question with you through the next 40 minutes. What is it that 500 people know about home, about belonging, about what it means to be truly rooted somewhere, that the rest of the world has quietly forgotten? Over the next 40 minutes, we will move through 3 layers of this story. First, why? Not why the cold is extreme, but why a community decided, generation after generation, that this particular place was worth staying for. Second, what? Every meal, every house, every morning routine here is evidence of a philosophy of life most of us have never encountered, a philosophy not of conquering nature, but of becoming part of it. And third, how? The real answer to why don't they just leave has nothing to do with not having options. It has everything to do with what they would lose permanently, irreversibly, if they did. Let us begin at the beginning, not with the cold, but with a choice. Most people, when they hear the word Oymyakon, imagine a place people ended up, stranded, cut off from everything modern life considers necessary. The reality is more interesting and more human than that. The Yakut people, known formally as the Saka, arrived in this part of Siberia before the 13th century. They were nomadic herders. They moved with their horses and cattle across a landscape that most of the world would consider unlivable. They did not end up here by accident. They chose this landscape not because it was easy, but because it was theirs. When the Soviet Union came, it gave the village a name and put it on an official map. Bureaucrats in Moscow decided that Oymyakon was a settlement, but the Yakut people had been living in this region for centuries before anyone thought to write it down. The Soviet state did not create this community. It simply acknowledged belatedly that something was already there, something that had survived without its permission for generations. This is the first thing the cold teaches you if you stay long enough to listen, that the people here are not here by accident, they are here by inheritance. And inheritance, when you understand what it carries, memory, skill, identity, obligation, is not something you abandon lightly. It is something you either honor or lose. There is rarely a middle ground. 500 people, in a village this sized, you do not have neighbors in the modern sense, people who share a postcode but not a life. You have something older. You have people whose survival is linked to yours, people whose chimney you check every morning, and who check yours. That is not sentiment, that is infrastructure, the most durable kind. Consider what -50 degrees Celsius actually demands of a place. A car engine left off for more than an hour will not restart without a specialized heater. Water pipes, if they existed underground, would freeze and burst within a single night. An unheated home goes below safe sleeping temperature before morning. In this environment, a neighbor who forgets to check on another is not thoughtless. They are, potentially, the last person to know that something has gone very wrong. And so a community forms that is not built on proximity or convenience. It is built on something more reliable than either of those things, the shared knowledge that you are responsible for the person next to you, and they for you. Every morning in Oymyakon, someone checks that every chimney is smoking. Because a chimney that has gone cold does not just mean the heating has failed, it means something, or someone, needs attention. The physics of extreme cold are unforgiving. At 50 below, your body is not trying to do anything productive. It is trying to stay alive. Every calorie you consume goes first to heat, not to movement, not to thought, not to anything else. To heat. This is why breakfast here is not a preference. It is engineering. A bowl of fatty food in the morning is the difference between a body that functions and a body that struggles. So when a father wakes at 4 in the morning in complete darkness, because in January the sun does not rise in Oymyakon until nearly midday, to light the stove before his family gets up, that is not a quaint tradition. That is a calculated act of care. He is not performing a ritual. He knows exactly what will happen to his children's bodies if the room temperature drops below a certain point during the night. He is solving a problem. He has been solving it in this way for his entire adult life. Every small act here is deliberate. There is no such thing as going through the motions in a place where the motions are the difference between warmth and danger. This is what the outside world misses when it looks at Oymyakon and sees hardship. What it is actually seeing is precision. Every action calibrated to what this landscape demands. The nearest city, Yakutsk, is roughly 1,000 kilometers away. For most of the year, the road that connects them is itself built on ice, the Kolymma Highway. Drivers call it the Road of Bones, a name that refers to the tens of thousands of Gulag prisoners who died building it under Stalin. History here is not decorative, it is literal. It is beneath the wheels of every truck that passes through. But the Yakut people's connection to this land predates the Gulag, it predates Soviet roads, and it predates the name Oymyakon itself. When you understand that this community is not a Soviet footnote, but a civilization that chose and shaped this landscape across centuries, the question "why don't they leave" begins to sound different. It begins to sound like asking someone why they don't leave their own name behind. Oymyakon is not a geographic prison, it never has been. It is a choice made not once, but every single morning, by every person who wakes up here and decides that today, as yesterday, this is where they belong. Understanding that changes the whole shape of the story, but understanding why they stay only gets you halfway there. To understand the other half, you need to see exactly how they live, what they eat, where they sleep, how they teach their children, at temperatures that would close every school in Europe. Because every detail of daily life here, every meal, every habit, every piece of architecture, is evidence. Evidence of something the rest of the world lost when it decided that nature was an obstacle to be solved, not a partner to be understood. And to see that clearly, I want to start with food, because in most places in the world, food is fuel. Here, food is philosophy. When the ground beneath you is permanently frozen, down to a depth of several hundred meters, in some places, you cannot grow crops. There is no harvest season. There is no bread made from wheat you planted yourself. The relationship between people and food here has never been about cultivation. It has always been about something older, knowing your landscape well enough to eat from it without destroying it. Stroganina is a dish most of the world has never heard of. It is raw fish, frozen solid, then shaved into thin translucent slices with a sharp knife. You eat it with salt, sometimes a little pepper, nothing else. Eating raw frozen fish sounds unusual until you understand that the extreme cold performs what cooking would otherwise do. It eliminates most parasites and bacteria. The cold is not the enemy of food safety here, it is the mechanism of it. The Yakut diet is built almost entirely around animal products: fish, reindeer, horse. No fruits, no vegetables for much of the year. And yet the Yakut people have historically had low rates of cardiovascular disease. Scientists working in Siberia began asking why. The answer they found started not with the people, but with what the horses were eating. The Yakutian horse is a breed that has evolved over more than 1,000 years in this precise landscape. It does not need a stable, it does not need blankets or supplemental feed. At -60 degrees Celsius, it stands outside, completely calm, using its hooves to dig through the snow to reach the frozen grass beneath. Scientists call that grass cryofodder. Researchers studying the nutritional composition of cryofodder found something unexpected. Grass frozen at very low temperatures retains a high concentration of polyunsaturated fatty acids, PUFAs. Those PUFAs are absorbed by the horse as it eats. The result is meat that is, gram for gram, richer in omega-3 fatty acids than Norwegian salmon. The animal that has adapted most completely to this cold has in doing so become one of the most nutritionally dense food sources in the region. This is not coincidence, this is co-evolution. The horse, the frozen grass, the permafrost, and the people, each one has shaped the others across centuries into a system that works precisely because no one tried to replace any part of it. The cold that makes this place seem hostile to outsiders is the very mechanism that makes the food so good. That is not irony, that is ecology. And the same logic that governs the food applies to everything else here. Starting with the homes, there are no underground pipes in Oymyakon, not because the technology does not exist, but because the permafrost makes it physically impossible to maintain them. Buried pipes freeze and rupture within a single winter, no matter how well insulated. So residents do something that looks, to an outside eye, primitive. They cut blocks of ice from the frozen river with chainsaws each winter, haul them home on sleds, and store them in a natural freezer beneath the floorboards. When they need water, they bring a block inside and melt it near the stove. This is not a failure of infrastructure. This is an infrastructure, adapted specifically to what this landscape allows and what it does not. The houses themselves reflect the same logic. Thick timber walls, floors built to insulate against the permafrost beneath.
wood-burning stoves that run on birch cut in the summer and stored under cover. Wood conducts heat at a fraction of the rate of concrete or steel. A timber house in this climate is not a choice born of poverty. It is the technically correct answer to the question the environment is asking. The toilet is outside. This is often the detail that Western commentators seize on as evidence of deprivation. But at minus 50 degrees, the cold performs a function that no sewage treatment plant can replicate. Immediate, complete biological neutralization. There is no odor. There is no contamination risk. The cold handles it better in some ways than the systems we have built to replace it. Not every inconvenience is a problem waiting to be solved. In the United Kingdom, schools close when temperatures drop to around minus 5 degrees Celsius. In parts of Texas, closures began during the 2021 winter storm at temperatures around minus 7. In Oymyakon, the school threshold is minus 52, and that applies only to the youngest students. The older ones attend until it drops further still. Is this cruelty? Is it deprivation? Before you answer, I want you to watch what the children look like on those mornings. They do not look miserable. They look like children who are going to school, because that is what you do on a school day. The cold is simply the weather. It has always been the weather. Their grandparents walked to school in the same cold, and at some point, a point that outsiders keep missing, that is not hardship anymore. That is just the morning. What those children are learning, by walking to school in the dark at minus 50, is not merely academic. They are learning that the world does not pause because it is uncomfortable, that the cold, whatever it demands of your body, is not a reason to stay inside and wait for better conditions, that life continues, and so do you. That is not deprivation. That is a value system, one that is passed down not through words but through the act of putting on your coat and going. There is a tendency, understandable but worth examining, to look at life here and catalog what's missing. No running water, no indoor bathroom, no reliable phone signal, no supermarket, no delivery service. The list of absences can feel long, but the people who live here are not cataloging absences. They are using what is present, the cold, the land, the animals, the community, with a precision and an economy that any systems engineer would recognize as elegant. They have not failed to build a different kind of life. They have succeeded at building this one. Adaptation is not a lesser version of civilization, it is a different version of it. One that requires more intelligence, not less, because instead of forcing the environment to conform to what you want, you have to understand it deeply enough to work within it. That is what the Yakut people have been doing here for 1,000 years, and it shows. And yet the question the outside world keeps returning to, the one that has never quite been answered to its satisfaction, is not about food or houses or schools. It is something simpler and harder than any of those things. If you could leave, why wouldn't you? Even if you understand everything I have just described, even if you accept that this is a rational, dignified, well-adapted way of living, why stay? The answer is not about what you keep when you remain. It is about what you lose, permanently, without any way of getting it back when you go. Some of the people who have left Oymyakon, young Yakut men and women who moved to Yakutsk or to Moscow or further, have come back, not because their new life failed them in any practical sense, not because they could not find work or housing or convenience, but because something in the life they had built elsewhere felt incomplete in a way they could not name until they returned. Something was present here that was not present anywhere else, and its absence over time became unbearable. The first thing that leaves when a community disperses is practical knowledge, the kind that cannot be taught in a classroom or found in a search engine. How to read the surface of ice before you drill a fishing hole. How to navigate a forest without any technology by reading the angle of shadows and the direction of wind. How to know by looking at the sky at midday whether the temperature is going to drop another 10 degrees before dark. These are not romantic customs, they are technologies. Survival technologies that took centuries to refine and that disappear, without exception, within a single generation of leaving. A Yakut child raised in Moscow will not know how to read ice. Their child will not know what ice like this looks like in person. By the third generation, the knowledge is not forgotten, it is gone. There is no memory of it to forget. That is the difference between a skill that is dormant and a skill that is extinct. And extinct skills do not come back. The second thing that leaves is language. The Yakut language, Saka, has more than 100 distinct words for different types of snow. Not as a poetic exercise, as practical vocabulary. Each word encodes specific information, the density of a given snowpack, its load-bearing capacity, whether it is safe to cross, whether it conceals water beneath. Information that a single English word, snow, simply cannot carry. You cannot translate that knowledge, you can only inherit it, through the language, or lose it. Linguists who study endangered languages describe this as the death of a taxonomy, a way of organizing the world that no translation can recover. The Saka language is not disappearing quickly, But in a community of 500, fragility is always one generation away from irreversibility. Languages survive through use. Use requires community. Community requires place. And place requires the decision, made again and again, to stay. But the most irreplaceable thing, the thing that the people who have left and returned describe in the same words in every account I have read, is harder to name than a skill or a language. It is a sense of exactly who you are, not who you have been told you are, not who you are performing for other people, who you actually are, stripped of everything optional. In a city, identity is layered over with profession, income, neighborhood, the things you project online. You are what you do, what you earn, where you live. In Oymyakon there is very little room for projection. The cold strips away everything optional. What remains is, who are you actually, when the temperature makes everything else irrelevant? The Yakut people have been answering that question, together, in this place for centuries. And the answer for them is inseparable from here. When a Yakut elder says, "I am from Oymyakon," it is not an address, it is a declaration. It carries within it the memory of everyone who survived here before them, and the responsibility of everyone who will live here after. It is not a description of a location, it is a description of a way of being in the world, of the knowledge that you were shaped by something difficult and specific, and that the shaping was not accidental, and that you carry it forward because someone before you carried it forward for you. The world asks, why don't they just leave? But here is the more honest version of that question. If they left, what exactly would they carry with them? Not the cold, they would be glad to leave that. Not the inconvenience of the ice blocks or the outdoor toilet. What would follow them is the knowledge, the language, the identity, things that survive only in use, only in this place, only in continuity with the people who came before. Leaving is not progress if what you leave behind is the very thing that made you who you are. And now we have everything we need to answer the question we started with. We began with a question. What is it that makes 500 people keep calling the coldest inhabited place on Earth home? We have now spent 40 minutes looking at that question from 3 different angles. And I want to give you the answer as clearly and plainly as I can, because it deserves to be said plainly. First, Oymyakon is not a place people are trapped in. It is a place people chose, generation after generation, because the cold, demanding as it is, built something that warm climates rarely produce, a community where no one is optional, where every chimney matters, where every person is someone else's responsibility. That is not a side effect of geography, that is a form of civilization, a rare one. Second, every aspect of life here, the food, the houses, the school schedule, the way water is collected, is evidence of a philosophy of adaptation rather than conquest. The Yakut people did not try to defeat this landscape. They learned its logic, and they built their lives inside that logic, and they built their lives inside that logic. And the results, the nutritional density of the food, the structural soundness of the homes, the psychological resilience of the children, are not accidents of poverty. They are the achievements of a civilization that chose its terms carefully. And third, the answer to why they do not simply leave. The skills, the language, the identity that give life its meaning here cannot be packed into a suitcase. They exist only in this place, practiced in this cold, passed on in this community. To leave is not to go somewhere better. It is to become someone different. Someone who no longer has the word for the snow that means thin ice above dark water. Someone who no longer knows what that word costs to learn, and someone who eventually forgets that the word ever existed. What makes 500 people call the coldest place on Earth home? Not the absence of better options, not inertia, or stubbornness, or lack of imagination. This, no other place can give them what this place gives them. The possibility of being without apology or explanation, exactly who they are. That is what home is. Not the easiest place, not the warmest place. The place where, if you left, you would spend the rest of your life trying to recover something you cannot name and cannot find anywhere else. If this film moved you in some way, even slightly, I'd like to know. Leave a comment with just one sentence. What does the word home mean to you? Not where you live. What the word actually means when you say it and mean it. Your answer will tell me what to make next. And it might tell you something about yourself that you hadn't quite put into words before.